Okay, hi everybody. Welcome to the Teaching English webinar for teacher educators. Developing skills to enhance your career as a teacher educator. And we'll be hearing from, got a great lineup for you today. We'll be hearing from Sirin Soyuz, who's based in Turkey. Also from Radhika Gholkar, who's based in India. From Anne Armstrong, who's based in Malaysia, and Donna Fleanta from Romania. My name's John Shackleton, and I'm going to be moderating today's session. So welcome. This is our fifth webinar in our second monthly series for teacher educators. You'll be able to register for future sessions, as you probably know, on the teacher educator page of the Teaching English website. Okay. Before we get started today, then, if I can ask you to do a few things while I'm running through a list of housekeeping items very quickly. If you can find the Q&A box, please. And if you could give us a shout out, if you'd like to tell us, one, where you're from, and two, if you're involved in preparing future teachers, if you work at the pre-service level, can you type pre-service into the question and answer box? And if you work with current practicing teachers at the in-service level, if you could type in-service into the Q&A box, that would be really helpful. So give us a shout out. Where are you from and which sector do you work in service or pre-service? Okay, some quick housekeeping then before we get started. So the session is being recorded and the recording will be available on the webinars page of the Teaching English website. The link to the feedback survey, which you'll need to complete to download your certificate, of course, that'll be available. The link will be available at any rate in the thank you email message that we'll be sending out after the completion of this webinar. I've already mentioned the Q&A box, but just as a reminder, that's a great place for you to put your questions and your comments, which we will get to towards the end of this session. We will be using the chat to make announcements as we go through today's session. Okay, great. So we're all clear what it is that we're talking about today. I hope you've all had a chance to tell us where you're from and which sector you're working in, and you've internalized those housekeeping items I mentioned earlier. So I would now like to hand over to our first presenter. Okay, Sirin Soyuz. She is based in Istanbul, specializes, as you might imagine, in teacher education. She's got a particular interest in e-learning. And she's going to be telling us a little bit about her career path. That's not Shirin, that's Donna, but Shirin will be joining us very shortly. She'll be talking about, in particular, the kinds of skills that she's developed in relation to facilitating the Pathway Builder program. So, Shirin, over to you.
Thank you so much, John, for this warm introduction. And hi, everyone. So, welcome to today's session. So, it's great to be a presenter, and I will be telling you about how we've been leading an engagement on our Pathway Builder program. As a teacher educator, first, I would like to tell you more about my career milestones, which is the topic of today's session. So once again, it's a pleasure for me to be here with you to reflect on my professional journey and hopefully offer some insights to inspire you on your own paths as teacher educators. So let me start taking you back to the beginning. So my journey in teacher development began with e-moderation training with the British Council. I was working for the British Council in Turkey at that time. And we had started online teacher development for the first time. And I did an e-moderation course. I learned how to be an e-moderator in online courses. And I think this phase of my career was foundational in two significant ways. First of all, it opened my eyes to the potential of using technology as an educational tool in teacher education. And it also introduced me to the concept of online communities for teachers. And it allowed me to build my confidence in facilitating online interactions and creating an inclusive and engaging online learning environment for teachers. And I really enjoyed e-learning. So further in my career here at that part, so at the Open University, I pursued a postgraduate diploma in online and distance education. And this program also helped me understand the broader landscape of e-learning. I learned about instructional design, e-learning and innovations, accessibility. So these two are, I think, foundational in my career in terms of introduction to learning technologies and using online tools, technologies in teacher development. And here also I learned about project management. I learned the importance of coordination, planning, and evaluation in executing successful teacher development projects. So it was not just about education anymore, but also about how to manage resources, handle deadlines, and lead teams effectively. So I didn't receive a formal qualification about teacher training, but I learned on the job while delivering sessions for teachers face-to-face and online. And I worked for the British Council during this time. And then in 2016, I decided to head back to my roots, teaching. So it was one of the most difficult decisions in my life, but also a milestone in my career, because I think as teacher educators, we need this practical experience. I had practical experience before, but for 10 years, I had been in the British Council and I needed this experience back to teaching was quite significant in my career. So during this time, I started my MA in curriculum and instruction. So curriculum is a very abstract concept, but it's at the heart and it's the heart and the brain of a program. If you are designing a teacher development program, you need to start with the curriculum, with the context, with the philosophy. So here I learned about curriculum models, curriculum design models, evaluation models, and I learned how to evaluate curriculum. So it was a great experience for me, learning experience for me. And around this time, I also began to explore online communities in a more focused way, because I started my role as the coordinator of the teacher educator community. And I recognize that these communities offer unique spaces for teachers to learn from each other, for shared learning, collaboration. And now recently I see more and more roles, more opportunities for teachers, for teacher educators to be community managers, community leaders. So it's a growing area, I can say. And my curiosity for learning didn't stop here, and I decided to start my PhD in curriculum and instruction. And recently this year I stepped into research mentoring here. Here I've been learning to guide others in their research journeys, sharing my expertise and facilitating their learning experiences. And it's a rewarding process, connecting teaching, training, research, and learning. And I joined a community here, Mentoring Teacher Research. You can find them on Facebook. It's a great community if you would like to find out more about research mentoring. And I've been learning about self-directed learning and artificial intelligence as part of my thesis. So this is just an overview. And I found this quite useful to put these on a timeline to see my strengths and areas of improvement. So it's been very helpful, this tool for me. And I'd like to give you a very specific example from what I've done at the British Council. So the Pathway Builder program. So I was leading the Pathway Builder program. So in this program, in the pilot program, we had two groups of teacher educators from Ethiopia, and these groups were facilitated by two engagement leads, like they are e-moderators, facilitators. And teacher educators first took a self-assessment tool. They took a self-assessment and they identified their strengths and areas of improvement. And then they were encouraged to select professional development resources from Teaching English to address their development needs. And over an 8-week period, they shared and discussed their learning and reflections regularly with the guidance of an engagement lead. So this program was different, I think, from the other programs that I've done so far. I'd like to give you a bit more information about this. So as we know, traditionally, professional development often take the form of an attending workshop or seminars in which the syllabus or content is prepared by someone else. And this may not be always applicable to a teacher educator's individual context and needs. But with this program, the biggest difference was that teacher educators prepared their own CPD course. So they had the opportunity to personalize their development according to their specific needs and interests. And this was done through the self-assessment tool that allowed them to evaluate their competencies. And then they selected the resources, so which articles they would like to read, which webinars they would like to attend or watch the recording. And this brought variety to the program, as everyone has different needs and interests. And these aspects bring about a shift from a traditional one-size-fits-all approach towards a more personalized, more collaborative and reflective learning approach. So these were the aims, but as we all know, there are always challenges and we need to develop key skills at all stages. So I'd like to mention the main challenges very briefly. First of all, our participants face technical issues, technological challenges. For example, they had issues with electricity, first of all, and because of that, they didn't have internet connectivity at all times, and they had difficulties accessing necessary technologies. And navigating the digital platform of the Pathway Builder was also a challenge, because we had planned this course on a learning management system, but because they didn't have internet and some participants were using mobile with poor bandwidth, some web links didn't open. So at that time, we had to develop some quick and effective problem solving skills. And so this was problem solving was vital in this role at that time. We had to make quick decisions without losing the participants' motivation and the momentum. And we had to adapt our strategies based on the needs of the project and the challenges of the participants. So we wanted to change the platform from an LMS to Telegram first. We did a course on how to use Telegram in education to improve our skills, and then the participants' feedback, after receiving feedback from participants, we decided to use WhatsApp, and we transferred these skills to using WhatsApp in a more effective way for learning and sharing. And the steps of the project was a bit challenging, so I learned how to design an infographic, and we changed the whole structure and we communicated these to the participants. So engagement and motivation was also another challenge, maintaining high level of engagement and active participation throughout the 8 weeks. And adult learners prefer practical knowledge that they can apply immediately. And but in this program, maybe for some participants, Pathway Builder didn't translate into practical strategies or techniques that they could use in their training context. So communication skills was important here. We communicated with the participants regarding the project's benefits. So we tried to answer the question, actually, what is in it for me? And we tried to encourage them in different ways by increasing our presence as engagement leads, by demonstrating, modeling, and giving feedback. So conflicts may arise in any team setting, and I felt I need to improve my skills to mediate and give feedback in a fair and constructive manner. And resilience was another important skill that I thought I need to improve. So I should be able to stay focused on the project's objectives, even faced with difficulties, setbacks, or challenges. So as a whole, I think, first of all, understanding adult learning principles and these potential challenges is the key in planning and implementing successful teacher development projects for teacher educators. So thank you very much for listening. So we will be answering your questions at the end of the session. So I would like to invite Radhika now for her presentation.
Okay, thank you so much, Shirin. Just before Radhika joins, so much in there. And if we get time at the end, really good to be able to come back and talk about some of those things that you've mentioned, like choice, for example, in the Pathway Builder. You talked about one of those key skills that teacher educator needs to have, which is to understand how adults learn. That was really interesting. And also the point about resilience as well, being, you know, we talk about resilience for teachers. We don't talk much about resilience for teacher educators. So if we have time, perhaps I'd like to explore those three things with you. And now, thank you very much, Shirin. I'd like to hand over to Radhika Gholkar, who's based in Delhi with the British Council. And she, like Shirin, will be talking a little bit about some of those milestones in her own career journey. And she's going to be talking as well, in particular, about teacher activity groups and the kinds of skills that facilitators of teacher activity groups needs. Radhika.
Thank you, John. Just a correction, I'm based in a very rainy Mumbai today, but thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak about this role. It's very close to my heart. And just before we dive into all the other details, I also wanted to say that for those of the participants today who are new to the role of a teacher educator or are exploring what that means for them, this is a role that that they could explore to begin with, and hopefully it's something new that they enjoy doing in the future. So with that, like Shirin, I would also like to take you through my journey. But before I do that, I wanted to say that you will see a very linear path on the screen, but it was nothing like that when it came to the emotional journey of going through these milestones of my career. Also, the boxes that you will soon see on the screen, I look at them more as turning points in my career rather than time-linked milestones of my career. So let me see if it's interesting to you. As all of us, I started teaching face-to-face. Of course, most of us, I did start teaching in college too, not young learners, but adults. I then moved to teaching online. So as you see, the journey seems quite straightforward, but it wasn't. It was at a time when teaching online was just picking up, and I was experimenting with teaching over the telephone, in fact. So this also formed the longest duration of my career. So that was a very interesting phase. I then moved to teacher training and development, where I directly train teachers across India. And this is where things started to become very interesting for me. Because from that point on, I did move to designing teacher development programs. And here's where I came face to face with the challenge of scale in countries like India, where there are thousands of teachers to be trained, or capacity development initiatives target a large number of teachers. And that forced me to think about what are the new models to explore when it comes to developing teachers' capacity in these contexts in India and many other contexts. I think at this point, we started thinking about teacher development in more like teacher-led development rather than an expert training teachers. And that is the context that I'm going to use today to talk about the role of a teacher activity group facilitator or a community of practice facilitator. As you can see, this thinking about how teachers can develop themselves at scale led me to experiment with the role of a community of practice facilitator. So as I mentioned, I'm going to, through the next 10 minutes, we are going to look at this role in the context of projects that we have done in 6 countries. I'm going to share some findings from the review of these projects and what the findings tell us about this role. So without further delay, what is a teacher activity group really? So a teacher activity group is similar to a community of practice For those of you who are new to this concept or are currently exploring this concept, there is a very traditional, commonly used definition on the screen where Wenger defines communities of practice as social learning systems where people come together, they are informally bound together by their shared expertise and passion for something that they commonly own, for example, a joint expertise. In the case of teachers, in the context we are all in, it kind of looks like what you see on the right side of the screen, where teachers meet in small groups, they share their experiences, they learn from each other, they reflect on their teaching practice, possibly even take something back from these meetings to their classrooms, try using something new, come back, reflect with their peers. And that's the kind of learning cycle we are looking at in a teacher activity group. Now, these teacher activity groups in reality, we sort of experimented with this model in 6 countries, including in India, where teachers met at their local levels in small groups and sort of took themselves through this learning cycle. But then what are the skills and what is this role of a teacher activity group facilitator? So in the picture, if you see, there is a tag facilitator standing and helping a group, asking questions or helping a group reach a consensus. And that's pretty much what we are going to talk about in the next few slides. So before we look at the role itself, what does and explore what the facilitator role looks like, I think a good starting point is starting with what makes a teacher activity group effective, what makes these meetings really effective. I'm going to refer to a review of projects that we did. As I mentioned, we implemented the teacher activity group model in 6 countries, including India. And we also conducted a review of these projects in these 6 countries to evaluate if this model is effective and to what extent is it effective. So the findings told us something about what an effective teacher activity group looks like. The first finding was most of these teacher activity groups had a very positive atmosphere. The participant teachers were very, very enthusiastic. They were very keen and passionate about learning together. There was very effective, good quality interaction between the teachers in the groups. There was open sharing of opinions. Most importantly, there was relevant, practical, and good quality materials that the teachers used in these meetings. There was a very clear structure which helped teachers not digress from the meeting aim or objective. And lastly, there was an overall non-judgmental environment, which means that the environment was safe. Teachers were able to share wrong ideas, make mistakes, and learn from each other. Now you see that some of the points out there, I have put them in a different color. That is because I want to highlight to you, if you look at the points in pink, for example, positive atmosphere, effective interaction, sharing of opinions, and a non-judgmental environment, it does beg the question, who can do this for the teacher activity group? There is a certain amount of role of the teachers themselves who are participating in the group, but this is also calling out to the role of the teacher activity group facilitator. And there is a lot that the facilitator can do to bring these aspects into play in a teacher activity group. So from this point on, then, what are the skills and qualities of an effective facilitator, right? So I'm just going to break down these points that we found out from the review. And the review further also breaks down the exact skills and qualities a facilitator might be required to have. So for example, language levels and adequate teaching experience was one of the points that came out as a characteristic or a skill of a good teacher activity group facilitator. When we talk about language levels, we're also talking about communication skills that go with them. And language levels could also be in the local languages, but it's important for a facilitator to have those communication skills, an adequate or at least matching teaching experience with their peers. If they don't need to be experts, but it's good to have a good amount of teaching experience. Digital literacy was also seen to be a very important skill for facilitators to have. It helped them coordinate with teachers, share relevant, good quality materials online, build sort of that motivation and rapport with teachers on other platforms so that they attend meetings regularly. The next two, ability to motivate teachers and safe and open environment, I think we addressed this in the previous slide. Again, these I call these more of personality traits and qualities rather than skills, because there is a certain amount of open-mindedness that you need to bring in that kind of safe and open environment yourself and build that rapport with teachers. And again, understanding difference between teacher activity groups and training is again very important. A very important point links back to the open-mindedness or the spirit of peer learning from each other, rather than an expert-led top-down training. So that understanding of that difference was also seen to be very important for a facilitator to be successful. And lastly, ability to maximize interaction opportunities. So this links back to what we talked about when we spoke about communication skills as being very important for a facilitator. The language levels that the facilitator brings to the meeting are very important for them to build that consensus and rapport in the group. So these, I've tried to break them down. These are also findings from the review. You can see there will be a link in the chat, I think, in some time. So I would like to end with bringing out what facilitation is and what it isn't, so that the qualities and skills that we discussed are sort of presented to you in some context, right? So when we talk about facilitation, we're talking about exploring and discovering together. So the facilitator is expected to work with the group and not necessarily always explain, tell, or teach the teacher group that they're working with. The role is more about enabling interaction and sharing of their own experience as well, rather than ensuring learning. So unlike in a training program where the trainer or expert might be required to ensure certain amount of learning, here the facilitator is not expected to make sure that teachers learn. If you remember, the idea of a community of practice or a teacher activity group itself is that it's a teacher-led initiative. It's a teacher-driven professional development pathway. So the facilitator is simply required to enable good interactions and not ensure learning. It's more about building consensus rather than making decisions alone. And it's about a peer learning mindset rather than a trainer or expert mindset. I think this point we've discussed quite a lot in the past few slides. And I hope that this clarifies the facilitator role. And I hope that it's not too complicated, because there are three very simple things that you can do if you want to explore becoming a teacher activity group or a community of practice facilitator. I think the first one is very obvious. Learn more about facilitation skills. As I would like to quickly go back to my own journey, where I said very clearly that although the journey looks quite straightforward, emotionally, it required me to take into consideration different ways how teachers could learn, how I could learn. It also required me to reflect on my own learning experiences, which led me to exploring the role of a facilitator in the first place. So I think learning about this role and what these skills really mean in practice is very important. But there is a lot to learn by shadowing or observing other communities of practice. I'm sure that you must be part of an informal community or a formal community already, and it will be good to shadow and observe what the facilitator does or what it takes for that group to be successful. And lastly, it's very straightforward. You could simply start your own community of practice. If you belong to a small group of teachers who are interested and who have a sort of a joint ambition or an aim to improve your teaching practice, for example, there is nothing stopping you from starting your own community of practice. playing along and seeing how it goes. I think I just want to end on a note where I said at the beginning that this is something, if you're new to the teacher educator role and would like to explore something new, these are 3 very simple steps that you can take. But on that note, I finish my presentation and I hand over to Anne.
Thank you so much indeed, Radhika. If I can just leap in here before Anne comes on. Some questions coming in around creating a positive atmosphere, and also about opportunities to do interesting work as a teacher educator, and not to follow a traditional path. And some of what you were saying about the differences between training and facilitation, for example, if we get time at the end, if we can come back to those 2 things about creating a positive atmosphere in groups and the differences between facilitation and training, that would be great if we can do that. Thank you so much indeed. I'd like now to hand over to Anne Armstrong, who's our 3rd presenter. Hello, Anne. I see you there. Anne is based in Malaysia, and she's going to be talking about her journey, her pathway, her career development in teacher education, into teacher education. And she's going to be talking about that in particular in relation to the Assured Certificate in Teacher Education, on which Anne is an e-moderator. Anne, welcome, over to you.
Thank you, John, and thank you, Radhika and Sirin, for setting the pace. Whoops. Oh dear, I'm the only person that's having problems here. Okay, as John has pointed out, I am going to talk about being the Assured Certificate for Teacher Educators online. I'm representing that. But to start off with, we'll have a bit about myself. I have had, you'll see in the next slide, that I've had a very circular journey. It's definitely not been linear, even resembling or any way linear. But I have been associated, I've been a trainer assessor since 2022, when I was offered the opportunity to train in this position. And I jumped at the chance, and here I am. But prior to that, if you go back to where I started from, as many of you, I started as a teacher. I started in the classroom. I started there. And then in the institution I was attached to at that time, in 2009, I was offered the opportunity to explore, to extend my boundaries, and to facilitate an in-house teacher training program. And I accepted the challenge and went forward from there. Then in 2014, I had the opportunity to join the e-moderating world. It was an exciting world that I had just, it had been around for a while, but I didn't really know about it until I had this opportunity. And I was at that point in time working in a blended program, and it sparked my interest. And I decided to take the opportunity. Educationally, and now it looks like it's linear, but it's not. And the next slide will show that my professional life has been anything but linear. I do hold a Master of Education, but prior to that, I did the Licentiate Diploma for Teaching English to speakers of other languages. And these certificates actually were just part of the learning journey. Now, my journey has been not linear. I have put the ACT trainer in the center because that's the focus of this particular talk. But as a teacher, I found that I experienced things. I worked as a teacher educator, an e-moderator, and quite often these things are happening at the same time. I've had a very circular journey. And when I've also put down that I work as a learner, because when I started as a teacher educator, it was basically, I was doing it on my own. I was trying to figure out where I should go. I was reflecting on what happened as a teacher. I was reflecting what happened in the training classrooms, in the training sessions, and trying to move forward in that. And I think it's also important that we're all learners. And whether we're teachers, whether we're e-moderators, whether we're an ACTA trainer assessor, we are learners. And that process of learning is continuous for our entire lives. So I'd also like to identify that the skills and knowledge that I developed as an ACT trainer assessor have been influenced by the skills and knowledge that I have as a teacher, have been influenced by the skills and knowledge that I have as a teacher educator in the physical classroom and in the physical training room, and also as an e-moderator, and also as a learner. And I think that everything moves around each other. Everything is very circular, and it rotates, evolves, it grows. The end project is much greater than what it would be if you had 1 and 1 equals 2. That's not the case. It's much, much greater than something as linear as 1 and 1 equals 2. And we're moving on to what exactly is the Assured Certificate for Teacher Educators Online. It's an online program. It's very practical. I think it's really good, and I wish I'd had access to a program like this when I started my teacher educator journey. It's run by the British Council, but it's certified by City and Guilds. And I think that that's a really important point, is the certification process. It's certified. It gives you a document. It gives you a certificate to show that you have done this program. And the other thing I would like to highlight about this is that it builds skills as a teacher educator. It's very much about building skills. And we also focus on learners' needs. We focus on the learners' needs, i.e. the participants in the course. What are their needs? How do we facilitate their learning? How do we enable them to develop their existing skills or to develop new skills? It's all about constructing knowledge and constructing skills. And I think the other really, really good thing about this program is that assessment is practice orientated. It's all about what happens in the training room. And that's a really, really important part in my viewpoint, because as both Radhika and Sirin have pointed out, adult learners want to apply. We want to see how we can use whatever we learn to put it directly into our situations. And I think that's a feature of adult learners, whether we're talking about myself, or I suspect whether we're talking about those of you who are out here. I want to apply it. I want to see how it works. I want to see if it works, more to the point. So what kinds of skills do we need? It's an interesting question. You'll probably see that a lot of the skills that I have listed here are ones that have been mentioned by Sirin and by Radhika. Yeah. And also as skills that we need as teachers, as educators. Well, we do need to have practical and theoretical knowledge. I did mention that the program itself is very practical, but the practice is based on theory. We need to understand the circumstances with which our participants are working. So I was part of a program in Sri Lanka. I'm currently part of a program in China. Circumstances are different. So what kinds of situations are our participants involved in? How do I adapt what I do to meet both the needs of the certificate and also the needs of the learner? So we have the needs of the curriculum and the balancing the needs of the learners. And we have to remember that we're transferring techniques. Not necessarily, well, we may be transferring knowledge too, but the focus is skills. The focus is on how we can actually organize a training session. And as I mentioned before, it has to be applicable, and we have to do it now. And I think as Radhika pointed out, and as Sirin also pointed out, adult learners want to apply what they learn here, now, immediately. And it's just part of what we do. We've also talked about the need to be adaptable and flexible. Yeah, the situations vary. I mean, you could have one day you don't have internet. That happens to me, or your internet collapses and you're halfway through a a meeting, we have to figure out how we can work our way around these problems, how we can solve problems. So always, I guess we're modeling for our participants problem solving skills, we're modeling the flexibility. And the other thing that I have here is reflection and constructive feedback. That is just so important in this program. Yeah, that is just really, really important in this program. But it's this one, the assured certificate for the assured certificate is a little bit different because the learning outcomes and the assessment criteria are basically prescribed. We have to meet those. But the challenge is then, of course, is to put it into the context of the learner so that they're meeting the prescribed assessment criteria and learning outcomes and still applying it to their own needs. So there's 2 points or 3 points actually that I want to highlight in the next slides are reflection and support and the flipped classroom. And now we'll just go on to the next slide. I have up here an image from Gibbs' reflective cycle. And I think that this image is, well, first of all, I think we learn by reflection. Okay, I think that as a teacher educator, as an e-moderator, and as a NAC trainer assessor, I learn by reflection. And this is incorporated, reflection is part of the assessment criteria, because quite often we may be working in a small group, we may be off-site, we may be working individually. And I have opted to use this particular cycle because it acknowledges feelings. And I think that's really important. That when you come out of the training room, as when you come out of the classroom and go, oh, well, that worked really well. Or how did I ever survive that? So those emotions, the emotions are really, really important, but we have to get over it. And the Gibbs reflective cycles gives us really, really clear steps to do this. And just to give an example, in my own personal, as an e-moderator, as a trainer, looking online, I actually decided, I went through one session, it was a bit long, it didn't flow quite right. And then I talked about it with my colleague, well, what can we change? And we decided to focus more on using the chat. And how can we incorporate the chat into our training sessions? And that became sort of like an action plan. How do we use the chat? We put it into our session plans. We actually then consciously use the chat function more. It made the sessions more inclusive. It made the sessions less laggy. So everybody had a chance to say something, even if you were typing. So this is just a really simple example. And I think that the reflective cycle lets us do small things. It doesn't have to be huge. It doesn't have to be earth-shattering, but a small sample, a small change can be earth-shattering both in the training room and also in the classroom. But the other one that I think is really important here is when to support and when not to support. And when I was thinking about this presentation, so what is the key skill? And I'm going support. And I don't know why this popped into my head, but there is a song, some of you may know it, this may be culturally bound, but I'm going to introduce it anyways. From several years ago, Kenny Rogers, who is a country and western singer, had this song from The Gambler. And it went something to the effect, you've got to know when to hold them and know when to fold them. And in this situation, an elderly gambler was giving advice to a newcomer to the field, and he was talking about playing cards. But I took it to mean support. So you got to know when to hold them. You got to know when to push up the participants so that they know that you're there and you won't let them fall. But on the other hand, you also have to know when to step back and when to let people give it a go on their own. I mean, of course, as the facilitator, as the moderator, I'm going to be there, but maybe I just will be sitting there and not saying anything, or only saying something if I think it's really important. And that is why I came up with this. Well, I didn't come up with it, Kenny Rogers did, but that is why this phrase popped into my mind, because we do have to know when to support and when to not support, and when to give people room to make errors, to learn from the errors. And the other thing I think is really important in this online course is that it is an online course. Basically, we're following the flipped classroom model. So the participants do the online course and they do all the coursework, and then they come, we do the assessments, we talk about it. So we're flipping it. We're building knowledge, we're building skills on something that they have reviewed, that they've completed. And when we meet face to face online, of course, and we talk about the assessments, we talk about the skills, we're building these on what has been conducted in the or what has been carried out in the online course. And to close, everyone, I'm going to hand it over to John again, but there are some really key takeaways. One is reflection and constructive feedback. The other one is support, and the other one is the idea of having a flipped classroom, and that is what this course is built upon. So thank you very much, everyone, and I will stop sharing and I will hand everything back to John. Thank you.
And thank you so much indeed. No webinar presentation is complete, of course, without reference to Kenny Rogers. I think that's an important takeaway as well. So much in there, and I hope we get time to explore what you've said in a little bit more detail and some of the questions that have come in. Again, one interesting one, which I'll just leave and come back to from Umesh, is about supporting teachers so that they're able to apply their learning. From training was the reference that Umesh gave, but in general, you know, you talked about ACT and as being a very practical thing, developing practical skills. How do you best encourage teachers once they once they find themselves again in the classroom to apply some of the learning that they've been exposed to? Okay, thank you so much indeed. Now I'd like to hand over to Donna Fleanta, who's based in Romania. She'll be talking a little bit also about her career journey, and she's going to be looking at some of the skills that she's developed during that long career in relation to a particular experience that she's had, which is around facilitating a community of practice. Donna.
Okay. Hello. Very nice to be here with you. Well, I'm going to be as short as possible because I'm time conscious, and you know the damnation of the last speaker is that most of the things that I would like to tell you about have already been said. But here's my career path. It has apparently been quite linear, but as my colleagues have pointed out, career paths are never linear, but we might have this impression. I was first a teacher, then a teacher trainer, an e-moderator, and now I'm an engagement lead. It happened to me what I think happens to most of us. An event, a person, a book, a course gives a significant turn to our career. In my case, it was the mentor course that was an eye-opener for me, as it showed me a teacher coming out from a dictatorship with little, if no connection with what was going on outside my country in terms of education and teaching. So this course showed me what supporting the professional development of a teacher is really about, and what skills a teacher educator needs to develop. I then took a mentor training course at the University of Leeds, and these refined my skills. As an engagement lead, I had the chance to work with a group of e-moderators who were to moderate their first online course. They were based in Sri Lanka. And we decided to put together an e-moderator handbook based on their reflections and their emotions during their first course. We have all experienced a first time when we do something, the first time we stepped into a classroom, the first time we gave a training course, the first time we moderated online. And we all know that this may be a roller coaster of emotions. And this is when I realized that my mentor skills were of great help in this particular project. I think Angie Mulderis came up with the iceberg metaphor of a teacher, and I will use it to show the similarities and differences I see between a teacher and a teacher educator. My colleagues have pointed out two similarities between and differences between teaching, facilitating, and a teacher and the skills of a teacher educator. So here is the teacher's iceberg. What's important to see here is that the visible tip of the iceberg is the teacher's subject knowledge conferred by the graduation diploma and professional behavior. So what we see, what's visible, is the professional behavior of the teacher. These will be influenced by the air, the culture of the whole school, and more significantly, the classroom in which the teacher works. Similarly, the mass below the surface will be influenced by the surrounding sea of the culture and society in which the teacher lives. And as teacher educators, we need to keep that in mind, because we work with participants in our programs that come from different cultures, different society, different educational systems. These knowledge constructs are embedded in deeper understanding about people, about learning and teaching, which themselves have been influenced by even more fundamental aspects like beliefs, attitudes, feelings. Remember, Anne pointed to that, and experience. The two-way arrows indicate that this is not a one-way process. The influences flow in both directions, and this may be set in motion by something that happens in the visible part of the iceberg or something that happens below the surface that may change what happens in the visible part, that is the professional behavior. Now, let's see what is the situation of a teacher educator. The prerequisite as now being a good teacher, whatever this may mean. To me, it means a reflective, open-minded teacher. And again, the visible T is a teacher-educator behavior. So this is what everyone sees. The rest is the same, right? Because as teacher educators, we plan, we review, we select material. Now, in terms of the knowledge base, we build our professional behavior on. In this case, as Shirin pointed pointed out, and Anne pointed out as well, adult learners. So we need to have knowledge about adult learners, about activities and processes for professional development, not for language learning or for whatever subject, other subject we're teaching. What being a professional is about, and all these are based on our understanding of professional development, professional learning, teaching and learning in general, and professional learning in particular. And deep down, just as in the case of the teacher, beliefs, attitudes, feelings, and values. And again, the process goes both ways, right? Everything that happens, either in the visible tip or beneath the waters, influences up and down everything that happens with us. And again, remember that our participants live and work in a particular culture, in a particular educational system, society, or school. Now, when I worked with the Sri Lankan e-moderators, who were very nervous about doing their first online course with their participants, I realized that the 5 teacher educator roles that Anju Maldares and Caroline Bodotsky mentioned are the roles I had to play at different instances while we were working on the e-moderator book. Now, the first would be an acculturated. I realized that I needed to show them the ropes as a full member of the community of teacher educators and e-moderators, the community they were joining at that time. As a colleague and full member of the community they were joining, I thought I could assist them to move from legitimate peripheral, as Leyland Wenger said, to full participation in the community. Then I needed to be a sponsor for them in the sense that I needed to use all my power, that is all my ability to make things happen in the service of the e-moderators I was working with. Support, Anne mentioned support before, remember. In my view, support, besides everything that she said, support also meant being a shoulder to cry on, a listening ear, which seemed to be extremely important for them to feel they were in a positive environment. Then, very important, I needed to be a model. I needed to model how to be rather than how to do, and making this visible to the teacher. And last but not least, I needed to be an educator in the sense that I needed to scaffold the learner of the skills of noticing, of learning from their own and others' experiences, and of developing an integrated knowledge base and responding contagiously to a range of emerging needs. This was extremely important to me. So these were the skills that I have developed over more than 40 years. And I hope I used during this project with the Sri Lankan e-moderators. So, as I said, over more than 40 years, I have developed all the necessary skills for an effective teacher educator. I took, and Anne pointed to that as well, I took a full 5-week online course to experience again being an online learner, which made me see for myself how important moderator support online is, and have become even more empathetic when moderating. I think it is paramount for a good teacher educator to be able to view the e-learning process from the perspective of the participant. In terms of pedagogic skills, my scaffolding techniques have improved. I know better now when to intervene and when to hold back, making sure I provide enough support, but do not eliminate challenge based on how much the group already knows about the topic. So getting out before you put in is one of my favorite principles. And this is what Anne mentioned before, remember? I have learned how to design interactive, collaborative, and meaningful tasks for the participants to show them I'm really listening to them by picking on points they made in the forum tasks or asking good questions and making sure I carefully choose my words so that the dialogue I engage them in is authentic and the learning environment is comfortable. Hasn't Radhika mentioned this before? I'm concerned about being always there for them without dominating the learning environment now, as I have learned when to step in to direct and when to step back to allow greater peer interaction. I pay attention to their learning styles, to what works and what does not work for them in particular in terms of learning, and especially to aspects related to cultural differences. I have a better experience and results with creating group dynamic online and creating opportunities for my participants to communicate better with each other and with me and learn from each other. I've been preoccupied to work on my managerial skills, especially on the management of my time, and model that to my participants. My social skills and communication skills have improved. And last but not least, my technical skills, as all my colleagues have pointed out, so I will not insist on that. I would only end by saying that, in my view, a teacher educator's main responsibility is developing their response ability. Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you so much indeed, Donna. So much in there and very, very inspirational as well. A fantastic fox. I thought a beautiful fox with glasses. Running out of time now. What I would like to do, though, I would like to leave our four presenters and our audience with a question for you to reflect on that I hope will bring together some of the things that Shirin, Radhika, and Donna have just spoken about. So it's a question for our panelists, but it's also a question for our audience at home, if in fact you are at home. Okay, it's quite a complicated question, so you need to be fox-like in your paying attention. So Shirin talked about the pathway builder. And one of the things about the pathway builder is that it's about choice. So the teachers who are participating in it choose the content that they look at. One of the things that Radhika talked about was teacher activity groups. Okay, so the point I'd like to focus on there is about the format of that learning. So that format is a teacher activity group, which is a subset of a community of practice. Okay. One of the things that Anne talked about, with reference, of course, to Kenny Rogers, was a particular skill, which is about standing back. So knowing when to step in and direct, advise, guide, when to step back, to allow time for reflection, to come to the answer yourself. And Donna talked a little bit, talked about many things, but one thing in particular that I'd like to focus on, which is about understanding the audience, and in particular, their values and beliefs. Okay. So the question that we'd like to leave the four of you with, and our audiences with, which do you think really, to answer Umesh's question, which is about the application of learning, which do you think matters the most in those different ingredients? Is it something to do with choosing the content? Is it something to do with the format? in which you encounter that content? Is it something to do with the skills, those hard training skills that a teacher educator has, like knowing when to step back, for example? Or is it fundamentally to do with how you understand how your trainees, mentees, how they feel about things? So that's the question for yourselves, which we will come back to at the beginning of our next webinar, which will be on the 12th of September. Simon Borg will be talking about planning CPD for teachers, some key principles. So please, it's going to be a very good one. Registration will be out soon. Details available on our website. 12th of September, 12 p.m. UK time. That's our next webinar. Don't forget, if you'd like to find out more about some of the themes that we've been looking at today, we've put together some associated research pieces for you to have a look at. They're available also on our website. As always, the key to success is our CPD framework for teacher educators and our self-assessment tool. So if you haven't already looked at that, if you haven't already done the self-assessment tool, please do so. That's also available on our landing page. The recording for the session today, and I really, really recommend you to tell your friends about if they missed it today, but also for yourselves, look at the recording again. There was so much in there that is so relevant to helping us to develop into and develop further as teacher educators. So take the opportunity to look at the recording of today's session. As always, there's a feedback survey for you to complete. We want to know what you think. And the link to that will be in our thank you message, which you'll be receiving tomorrow, and also details about how you can download the very important certificate, which is another big area that we didn't have a chance to talk to. So again, let's remember to make that opportunity to talk about the function of certification in learning pathways and career development. And finally, don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter. Details also available on our website. Thank you so much indeed, Shirin, Radhika, and Donna. Really, really interesting webinar. So much packed in there. Thank you to Andrea and Mark for hosting today's event. Thank you very much for that. And thank you all for attending, for your questions and for your comments and for your attention. And importantly, I hope for your reflection on that final question. So thank you very much indeed. Have a great afternoon, evening or morning, wherever you are, whatever part of the world. And we will see you again, I hope, on the 12th of September, 12 p.m. UK time. Thank you and goodbye.